Yo, guys, what is going on? Lucky Cheese 7 is back again to give you guys Attack on Titan Season 4, the final chapters, Part 2, live stream discussion slash review. And I'm not gonna lie, you guys, this is actually very surreal. This is, to me, like, I still cannot believe we reached this point. I still cannot believe that this is it. But this is the last time, the last official time that I'm going to be talking about the Attack on Titan anime. Because if you've known me going back 10 years, when I started talking about Attack on Titan, it was still only 4 episodes in. I did my initial thoughts on the first 4 episodes, and then episode 5 came out, and then I stuck with the series, stuck with the season, and then when season 1 ended, I jumped on board the manga because I wanted to know what happened next. And we were in a 4 year limbo of like no anime announcements until what was it, 2016? Like yeah, 3 years. So it was about 3 years since we got anything about a season 2. Then season 2 came out, followed by I want to say season 3. Yeah, season 3, which got split into 2 parts, admittedly. And then now finally we're here with the final season, and it's incredible just seeing, like, just the journey we've been on. Because around the time when the final season was announced, I don't know, was coming out, the manga was like close to wrapping up. Like, there may have been like what, 4 or 5 chapters left at the time, I think, because I know the anime was debuting in December. And right around that time, Isayama dropped an announcement that, hey, we're gonna be ending soon. Like, I want to say it was chapter 135. So relatively, like, 4 chapters were remaining. So 136, 137, 138, and 139. And that was it. Like, AOT was gonna be finished. And I remember just thinking, like, wow, what a time it is to be. That the manga's ending up and the anime's not hitting its final season. Like, it was nuts just thinking about it. And then of course, we get the cycle of, well, we final season part 1, final season part 2 was not really a huge stretch. It was a matter of like, okay, so how are they gonna adapt part 2? Because a lot of us kind of assumed, well, if they're gonna adapt it with more episodes, you would think, okay, see, part 2 is gonna have a lot more episodes. And it did. No, no, it didn't. Part 2 only had like what, 12 episodes, right? Because part 1 had 16. Part 2 had 12, which was kind of like, really? Like, that's a really interesting approach that they decided to go with that instead of anything. But pretty much after part 2, it was kind of one of those things of like, are we getting an Attack on Titan movie? Are we getting like part 3? And if we're doing part 3, how many episodes is that going to be? And I think with what Mappa did, they handled a pretty good approach of doing specials. I'm like, all right, you have the final chapters specials, like specials 1 and then specials 2. Now, the annoying part, I will admit, was the timing of these specials coming out, because specials 1 came out, I want to say March, right? It was March of this year. And we had to wait a long while. Like, if we go from March to November, yeah, let me do the math on that real quick. So that's about, yeah, so like almost 8 months, if we're really looking at it. Like almost 8 months without us getting a part two. And it makes it even worse for the dub because the dub for uh final chapters part one was a 6 month wait. And I wonder if Crunchyroll is going to take that same approach where when we do get the dub, is it going to be like another 5 to 6 month wait? Which wouldn't surprise me, by the way. But there's that. And I do just want to say, like, those were kind of like my expectations going into this. Just reliving everything and just thinking, like, wow, like, we're here. And I do want to preference this because I've mentioned it for a long while. But when it came to the finale of Attack on Titan, if you've known me for the longest time, you know my thoughts on the ending. For the most part, have not been positive for the most part. They haven't really been super positive when it came to the ending. And then the ending, of course, kind of retroactively kind of changed my view on, the previous four chapters because pre 139, I was kind of like, well, okay. Like 135, I think for the most part, I did like. 136 was pretty good too. The first half of chapter 137, I really dug. And then second half was kind of just like, wait, what's going on? And then you hit some great content with 138. And then 139 was kind of like, what just happened? Like it was like it left me a mess for a long time with Attack on Titan. And it was something that I just had to sit on for like and I mean for like a very, very long time. Thankfully not 10 years, but better course of 2 years if I'm being perfectly honest here. And it's kind of hard for me to talk about this because I remember again not being super thrilled about the ending. So when it came to this finale, I kind of wondered how is Mappa going to approach it? What are they going to do to make it not only digestible for anime onlys, but what are they going to do with the content that we were given in the manga, especially for the final chapter? And how are they going to deliver that in you know, a good fashion? Because something I do want to address here is that Isayama, right before the finale came out, he did state that there were going to be some changes made with the finale. And they got people talking like, yo, is AoE a thing? Like, are we getting AoE? And I always said this for the longest time. AoE was kind of like a 40-60% chance of it happening, in my opinion. 40% chance that it was going to happen, 60% chance that it wasn't going to happen. And I got curious. I was like, well, ECM is aware that the ending reception to the manga was not exactly great. And one of the things he always talked about was a conversation of sorts that happened. And I'm pretty sure he went to Map and said, yo, we got to change this. But I'll delve more into this right now with the pros. So, from a technical aspect, I will say this was perfection. I love that they brought back Linked Horizon for the OP. Like the last Titan, that song and the visuals, I will say is a perfect culmination. It's a perfect culmination of everything that encapsulates Attack on Titan. And I think it was done so beautifully. It really was. Animation wise, not even just for the song, but just for this final episode, like it was top notch. It was like so top notch to see like just how far Mappa was willing to go. And we saw how far they were willing to go with the final chapters part 1, but with final chapters part 2, it was just another step. And you can just see like how much they've grown from again, the final season part 1, going into final season part 2, and then now with the final chapters, like, it's only gotten better and better and better, and I applaud Mappa all the way. If there's one thing I will say, is that the team of Mappa, okay, because there's always been this big debate between, "Yo, it should have been Wit, it should have been Wit." Now, would Wit have done look, I'm pretty sure for consistency's sake, yeah, it would have been nice to see Wit go full through and adapt in the final season. But let's not discredit ourselves and say Wit did a shitty job because they did a pretty good job with adapting the content at hand. And also the OST. Oh my god, the OST, beautiful. OST, I don't think anyone can deny that either. The OST for AOT was a real treat, for sure. And again, like that's just technical aspects go. So technically, again, like from the soundtrack to animation to the OP, that's perfection. That to me is perfection when it comes to this final episode. Now, when we talk about the final battle, a funny story. So, when these chapters were coming out monthly, I remember thinking at the time, like, there's 4 chapters left. I wonder how Isayama is going to actually conclude it. And I remember, like, each month it was like, well, okay, interesting, but like some parts of it felt a little off when it came to the manga. And I will say, like, when you're reading it in a volume format, it definitely did help because you're not bound by just waiting 1 chapter a month. You're, reading it in a bulk. And very similarly, when you're watching this final episode, like it flows better. Like it's, you know, action, action. Majority of this episode is definitely like action focused, and I do think that's a huge highlight of the episode. Is just seeing the team effort of the alliance, which again I will always say this: the alliance in terms of like the warriors, I get their aspect of it. Parody has always still kind of just been the weird one, but that aside, if we're talking about like the effortness of teamwork, okay, Armin, Mikasa, Jean, Annie, Reiner, Peak. Oh my god, Peak was a huge standout. I want to say that right now. What Peak did, taking on multiple past shifters at once without even breaking a sweat, was beautiful. Scene to me, like even reading that scene in the manga, I thought to myself, like, dude, like Peak is a badass, and I don't think anyone's gonna deny that. Seeing was what Peak's able to do. It was also nice seeing Annie too. Um, kind of get like one final, like collaborative effort, if you will, against the founding Titan. Jean did a pretty good job too. I mean, the real big highlight for Jean was, detonating, the blast to pretty much sever off Eren's head. But the big one for me, I will say, is Armin. Armin to me in this final battle really stepped up. And I don't know if I addressed that a lot in the live reaction I did to the manga, but when it comes to Armin as a character, and you see what he does, it's and I'm sorry that I keep like breaking off, but it's truly it's nice to see because throughout this final season, like you're looking at Armin, and one of the biggest things with Armin is that like you have this element of him of like trying to stand up, and he's always kind of essentially kind of taking a back seat to Mikasa and Eren. He did have like a lot of great highlights pre time skip as like the tactician and the tactician aspect of Armin, as far as the time skip goes, because this is even a thing in the manga, but Armin as a tactician kind of sort of faded away, if you will. It kind of sort of faded when it came to, you know, this. But I will say, seeing him go into battle against Eren, beautiful. It was beautiful. But more than that, I loved the outburst Armin was having at his his body whenever he got taken by the Okapi and he was kind of like stuck in paths because he it's a very meta commentary about like how a lot of people probably felt about Armin. Like, yo, you're weak, you're a piece of shit, like do something. Why are you always in this scenario? And I like that we went with that approach with Armin where he's telling himself, like, bro, stand up. Like, why do you keep doing this? Why do you keep letting people down? And I do remember saying this in the manga, but that was beautiful then. And I will say that's still a very beautiful thing now. That to me was still great. Again, it was nice seeing Annie, have her approach, put some team effort in, especially teaming up with Mikasa too. Like that to me, when you consider the history Annie and Mikasa have with one another, and you see where they are here in this final stand against the Founding Titan, it was pretty cool. And Reiner, oh my god, Reiner was a beast. I mean, he's the armored Titan for crying out loud. I mean, what more can I say than that? If there's one thing I think a lot of people can agree on, when you see where Reiner was at the beginning of Attack on Titan and seeing where he is right now, like Reiner in this moment of the final episode is great. It's really great to see with what he's doing here. Now, when it comes to the last bit of Reiner, I'll talk about that in the negatives, but with what he does here, again, with his tenacity to press on and just the struggle he has against the worm. I mean, I don't really have anything negative to say about that. I really don't. Now, Falco doesn't really do a whole lot per se outside of like getting the members of the alliance to safety. Like when they're in like the neck of trouble, he's there to like kind of save them and like pretty much be like transport. That's kind of what Falco is. It is a little disappointing that that's kind of what his role is here in the final battle, but I mean, everyone's got a part to play. Gabby is the sharpshooter. She only has like one real highlight moment, if I'm being perfectly honest, and that is when she headshots uh the Akapi. That's it. Which is cool, but it also just kind of show like bro, Gabby is like if you want to talk about line of sight and being in danger, don't be where Gabby is because girl never misses. That's the one thing I will say. The girl never misses. I don't know if I talked about Mikasa yet, but I mean, I want to go with what with the general consensus is that like Mikasa, if we're talking about her badassery, that's present. You see that here with what she's able to do against some of the past shifters. And again, especially with the team up that she has with Annie, I thought that was really cool too. And then there's Levi, which Levi's only real highlight, I will say, again, was Zeke. Like if you look at what's the last order Erwin gave to Levi, kill the Beast Titan. And that's been his entire objective throughout the course of this final season. Kill Zeke. That's been it. I want you to kill Zeke. And that's kind of just been the only order that's kind of been taunting Levi since the death of Erwin. Is like, I've carried out like all your orders, everything. And why is it this final order that's just kind of put a lot on his mind, if you will? That's kind of just been like the only real tension point with Levi was that. And it was nice seeing him, like, just get that moment of him finally completing his order. I will say that was pretty cool. And again, that's just basically like all the stuff of like, with what everyone's able to do. Again, the only probably two weak ones in team effort wise, I will probably say is Gabby and Falco. But it's a very minor like nitpick, I would want to say, when it comes to just what they're like what each person like kind of contributes to. Now, the big one. I do want to talk about this because it was a huge highlight point for me in the manga, and it's still a very huge highlight point for me in the anime. And that is the conversation that Armin and Zeke have about the essence of life. And I remember reading that section of 137 and just being like, whoa. Like that is like some really, really deep shit that you kind of got a little bit of an essence of beforehand. And it's one of the things I do feel Attack on Titan is always strong at is when you're delving into like these philosophical like situations about like like what it means to live, what it means to have life, to multiply. Like it's fascinating. It really is like super super fascinating. And which again, you have this whole conversation like again about life, and then Armin holding a little piece of leaf from his perspective that's like kind of buried in the sands of paths. But then you see from Zeke's perspective that he's holding a baseball. And it kind of gives him the motivation to like, no, Armin, maybe you are kind of right. Maybe this is something we should do. And then you kind of get like some of the past shifters. You get Grisha, you get Bertold, Marcel, Porco. Who else is there? I'm trying to think. Ymir's there too. I just mentioned Berthold. Who am I missing? Oh yeah, Kruger. Which Kruger's always kind of been the odd one. Like even when I read the manga, Kruger was the big stand-up for me. Where I was like, really? Like we're bringing Kruger in? Like the others I could see. Kruger was always the weird one because of like with what he stood for as a character. So I was kind of just like, hmm, okay. Like out of all the past shifters, Kruger's there. Little weird, but we roll with it. Now, going from there, which again, I do want to say this the Armin and Zeke conversation about life, and I might have mentioned this, but it's amazing. To me was like amazing stuff. And as far as like the final battle goes, again, team effort wise and everything, it's great. Then we get a see you later. And this was a huge point. It was a very, very huge point of the story because this was something. If you go back to the manga, chapter one, Isayama laid the groundwork for the see you later scene from chapter one, and it was always a talking point within the community of Attack on Titan of like when exactly does this scene take place, and more importantly, what's the significance of it, and all of that comes to fruition here with Mikasa getting the headache of her remembering the last conversation she had with Eren. And what you kind of get essentially is a what if scenario of what would have happened if Mikasa told Eren something different. Of instead of telling Eren that he's family, What if it's because, you're the one who saved me. You're the reason why I kept on living. Would that have changed the outcome? For Mikasa, and again, this is just from Mikasa's mindset. Through her mindset alone, you could very much say, yes, through her eyes, it probably would have changed. And if you're looking at Eren as a character, he's always kind of been like on this like predestined fate of like, look, things are happening as I see it. There's nothing I can do to change it. And a lot of people will like to make an argument and say, well, obviously it would probably change Aaron's mind too. And I think it would for a little bit, but I think he would also know, like, no, like it wouldn't like really change a whole lot of stuff. But for Mikasa, it's like a big deal. Like, yo, if I told him something else, maybe we would have like gotten something different. But again, it's a great scene. It's a great scene, a great moment within the manga, and the way the anime did it. And I will always say this because when you get the little foreshadowing of the "see you later" scene, it happens at the in the beginning of the special, the first special that we get of Final Chapters Part One. And again, that's kind of for obvious reasons because it was one of those things where you didn't get it in the first episode of the anime. So it was always kind of one of those things of like, well, the placement there feels a little last minute of like, oh yeah, here's this one additional scene we never got to include in season one, and we're including it here just to, tie up the story in a way. Which, again, as far as adaptation goes, the foreshadowing of the "see you later" scene much stronger in the manga, but as far as the anime goes, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. I mean, I don't really have any complaints about that. And then, I mean, again, you've got a good conversation between Eren and Mikasa, and where he's just telling her, like, hey, look, let's make one last promise. Like, throw the scarf away. Like, after I'm gone, like, after my body disintegrates into bones, the scarf that I gave you as a gift, please throw it away because I know you're tied down to me because of this gift that I gave you. And I want you to live free, live a long, happy life. It was a heartbreaking scene. And I don't think anyone can deny that. That when you see that particular scene, it's a good scene. It's a really, really good scene. But then, of course, that leads us to Mikasa, like putting the scarf on, saying, no, I'm sorry, I can't. And then she goes through and tells everyone, hey, Eren's in the mouth. Which has kind of been a weird point as far as the manga goes. And I know some people will say, well, you're just nitpicking, Lucky. Like how is that weird? She's just telling him, like, hey, he's in the mouth. And I say it's a little weird because the anime, in my opinion, could have taken a little moment to address how she found that out. Like how she knew he was in the mouth. And one thing I could probably say is that maybe when they both hugged, Eren probably whispered something into Mikasa's ear, saying, hey, in case you want to know, I'm in the mouth. Like, it could have been something like that. So it's one of those things of like, it's your interpretation of like, how do you feel that happened? Because otherwise, it is a take where you're sitting there and kind of thinking, well, okay. But, you lead to that scene. They're all going in. They're taking on Eren. And this is like after the head gets severed off, the hallucinogenia comes out. And again, that leads to Eren and Armin, like, in their Titan forms, like, actually, like, like, having their fight. Which visually looked amazing. It was a visually stunning scene. Like the way how Eren transformed, you have like the fire in the background, and he's like just walking towards them. Like I got chills. Watching that scene gave me chills. Like I remember, and again, I've been seeing this a lot, but like it was like a really cool scene in the manga. But the chills I was getting with the anime and the OST in the background, I was like, shit. I'm like, he's coming, and Aaron's here. He, I'm like, y'all are gonna be done for unless something happens. But ultimately, Mikasa goes in. She sees Eren. He opens his eyes, and I love the shots that you get because he opens his eyes. You see like the sad expression on Mikasa's face because she's killing someone who's like very important to her. That's been very dear to her. It's the guy who saved her life and kind of propelled her to like keep on living. And I can just imagine like being in Mikasa's situation like that and just thinking, like, man, like if anyone's put in that situation of like letting a loved one go, it's hard. It's a really really hard moment to kind of take into consideration. And you know the way it was done because you have Aaron opening up his eyes, and I love the close up that you get because you get a close up shot of like just Aaron's eye. Mikasa's coming in the frame, and like as the head's getting severed, the eye closes. And Mappa did a beautiful job on that. That to me was like just incredible. It was beautiful. Which leads to the she kisses him when his head is severed. It's like, okay, like it's a little weird. Like you I get the symbolism and the emotions behind it, but visually it is kind of disturbing when you see it. It's like, ugh, like girl, I get what you're doing, but head severed. Like, which I do think it's a little funny because the manga had a more heavy emphasis on that shot, whereas in and when I say heavy emphasis is that like Aaron and Mikasa were like a huge highlight point with that scene of Mikasa like just kissing, you know, Aaron on the lips. But the anime is more of like a wide shot approach. Interesting take, but yeah, that's one of those. But Mikasa killing Eren, and I always said this at the time that Eren dying would have probably been a little bit predictable for sure, and it was something I did see coming. Like when it came to him staring off into the ocean, but the way it was done with the OST in the background definitely heightened the moment for sure. And amazing. I mean, I know it's so far I'm kind of just going off on a praising streak here, but I am pretty much just talking about the positives of this finale. And that pretty much leads us into the neutral zones. And we need to talk about Zeke's final send off here. Because poor Zeke kind of like went off the grid once Aaron started the run because it was like, yo, what the hell happened to Zeke? And we come to find out that okay, he's been stuck in paths for ages within the bases of the founding Titan. And he and Armin have a way to get the path shifters to, break free and assist the alliance. And then he looks at Levi. He's like, "Hey, yo, I know you probably don't want to see me." Or no, it's not that. He says, "Yo, I know you've been looking for me. I probably haven't been looking forward to this, but hey, I'm here. So just you know, after all the shit that I've pulled, just go for it, Levi. That was okay. Like I would have kind of imagined maybe Zeke and Levi probably would have like had one like true final confrontation, but I can kind of see with where Zeke was leading in that point because given his life, given where he was at that point, it's understandable of why he would just say like, "Look, like man, the site's so beautiful, but after all the shit that I caused, like I just end me." And then the other neutral thing comes with the founder Titan overwhelming Eren. And this is pretty much when Eren and Armin are having their conversation. And I put this in the neutral category because it's a really fascinating concept of like, your main protagonist is so powerful. It's like practically impossible to beat him with like the state he's in. But to go the approach of the founding Titans powers is too much. And it pretty much does this aspect of like, the past, present, and future. They're all connected. And I ignore the sound in the background. It's just the clock just going off every hour. But it's an intriguing concept, and I think it would explain a lot of stuff. But I put it in the neutral category because I do feel like this should have been one of those things where we get little hints at, like here and there. Like, say, whenever the Alliance is like trying to take on, the Jaegerist, maybe we cut back to Eren and we see him like just having like these conflicts, like this inner like debate with himself at like various points in time. And I think it would have probably made for a better, you know, reveal. Because it's like, bro, like, well, what the hell's going on here? Instead of like getting it like all here, it would have been like, okay, we're kind of building up to something's going on with Eren, like mentally speaking. But again, this does also come down to a flaw within the final season, and even more so with the time skip is that like you go so far without knowing what's going on in Aaron's mind, and I do believe that did kind of hurt the story in its own way. I mean, it's cool. It's a very intriguing concept of like, yo, you've been following your main protagonist. You see with where he is. You know what his thought process is, but then to take that away, beginning of the time skip again, it's a ballsy move, but it does kind of build up a little bit of intrigue of like, okay, so what's the big reveal gonna be of what's going on, and it's more or less kind of one of those things of like you're kind of getting it all at once, as opposed to say dropping like little seeds here and there of like, okay, maybe there's something here, you know. But I say it's more so in the neutral zone just because of that. And by the way, speaking of the Aaron and Armin conversation, I didn't exactly address this, but the chat Armin and Aaron have, that was, in my opinion, such a beautiful change from the manga. Because, and let me pull up chapter 139 real quick. Because, for the most part, it does kind of start off the same. But the thing about the conversation is that Armin, like Aaron, pretty much reveals to Armin that The rumbling will kill 80% of humanity, and they will lose the capacity to wage war. This is pretty much like at the very beginning of chapter 139, when they're still kind of like in their kid forms. And Armin does get a little shocked, but he never like, you know, like say like, bro, like what the hell? Like for real? Well, no, what I mean by that of like he doesn't feel like super distraught about it or like, bro, like what the like how? Like what was going through your goddamn mind? Like that's the thing Armin didn't do. Like instead of doing that, he kind of was like, "Oh man, like I'm so sorry you had to do that," as opposed to just being like, "Bro, like there could have been something else we could have done." And it's also kind of one of those things too, where the last bit of conversation between Eren and Armin revolves around Mikasa about her being the one that Ymir was kind of like seeking towards. And that's kind of where you kind of get into this whole conversation between about Mikasa, how Eren felt, Armin punching him. Pretty much, you get the famous meme panel of Eren just feeling like complete shit, and him saying like, "No, I don't want that." Mikasa finding another man, I don't want to. I want her to think about me and no one else for the rest of her life. Even after I die, I want her to be hung on me for about like 10 years at least. And I still remember to this day just reading that scene and thinking like, bro, what the like, what? And I gotta say, it was pretty funny just seeing that in the anime because seeing it in the manga was kind of just like, bro, what are you doing? But then seeing it in the anime, I couldn't help but just laugh. And especially since it's a meta commentary from Armin just saying like, oh, okay, I didn't expect something that pathetic. He says, please don't repeat that to Mikasa. I want her to be happy. I really do, but I don't want to die. I want to be with Mikasa, with everyone. Armin goes off to say, like, Eren, don't give up. We can find another way. No, I'm pretty sure none of them wanted to die either, but how could I ever be forgiven? And in the manga, what you see are like just footsteps, just pure footsteps of what's it called? Of the Colossal Titans, just stomping through civilization. Even if I didn't know that you'd stop me in the end, I think I still would have flattened this world. Almost every forest and leave the land covered in carrion flattened insects a few days later. I wanted to leave every surface a blank plane. And he's why. And he's like, I don't know why. I wanted to do it. I had to. And the conversation pretty much just ends with Eren telling Armin, like, hey, it's time. I'm erasing all for memories of this place. Next time we'll meet, we'll be trying to kill one another, but if I remember this once again, it's finally settled. And Armin's like, Eren, thank you. And if you want to talk about like taking a huge blow, this is definitely a huge blow. Armin's like, you became a mass murderer. For our sake, I swear I won't let this terrible mistake you're making be in vain. They hug it out. I don't know what I'll do after I die, but I know you can make it to the other side of the walls. Humanity will be saved by you, Armin. And then it just flashes back to chapter 131 when Armin and Annie are having that conversation. But I remember thinking about that exchange in the manga and just thinking like, that's it? Like, did Armin really just give Eren the same kind of treatment Naruto gave to Obito? You know, the whole, Obito's nothing but awesome? Because I was like, this is so cringe. Like, what are we doing? That's dumb. But the anime doesn't do that. Instead, you have Armin pretty much like hold Eren accountable. Like, how could you do this? Like, was there really like no other way? Like nothing that could have been done with it. You say you're doing this for us, but look at this. Like no one's gonna treat us like heroes after this, and that does kind of lead to a scene I do feel is gonna become meme material, which is gonna be where Eren says like, because it did start off with him saying like, "I don't know why, I just wanted to," but then he actually does kind of start questioning like why. I thought I was initially doing all this to protect all of you guys. And then he mentions this. Like, yeah, Hanji died. Sasha died. And why did I do this? It's because I'm an idiot. A garden variety idiot who got power. And I know for a lot of people, people that don't like the ending, like myself, who are saying, like, bro, what the hell? Like why was that line of dialogue like necessary? Because it makes what everything Aaron was doing go like really? Like bro, like how much more lower can you stoop? Like I've seen that conversation go off. And that's the point I want to address here. Like that's in my neutral zone for the final episode, which is shocking because you would think I would be the one who complains about that line the most because Aaron's my boy, and throwing in the scene like that, it's kind of like, what are you doing? But I thought about that scene for a while, that line of dialogue, and that's actually kind of why I didn't do a stream right off the bat when this finale episode came out because I wanted to sit on this, and I think it's very telling when you see that Isayama wanted to make changes in this final script with what happened in the last chapter and like kind of just like retweak the dialogue and make it flow more naturally. So when you're taking the scene out of context of Aaron being an idiot, yes, it is kind of like, bro, like what the hell's going on? But if you take that line of dialogue and bring it forward, of with Armin's side of thing, saying that like no, like I can kind of relate with what you're doing, especially given the fact that Armin did have blood on his hands too, if you will. And Aaron kind of brings up like, no, like you're a liar. Like you've never had a thought like that. To which Armin pretty much just takes an accountability too of like, look, what you're doing isn't just on your hands. It's my fault too because I showed you the book. I gave you the mindset approach that what's beyond the walls is nothing. It's you know, lands of ice, fiery water, like all this stuff is like a blank slate beyond the walls. That's the approach and the idea that I kind of planted into your mind, and it's my fault too. So I take as much responsibility for what happened here as you do, and it really kind of shows like just how deep the friendship, the bond is between Aaron and Armin. Because again, the manga doesn't have this. Like what I'm talking about right now is specifically for the anime. And I think it was a really brilliant idea to have the discussion of the 80% rumbling after you have the exchange of Mikasa being a talking point. I think it's so much better to have the 80% discussion after you have the whole, you know, talk about Mikasa. But I think it's like just also like really special that you see this moment You have them both having that exchange of like, yo, like the next time we meet, like we're gonna fight it off for sure, but after that, we're gonna be together forever. And Armin and Aaron's like afterward, like where? And Armin says like in hell, if it exists, of course, because we killed 80% of humanity. You and I will always be together. And I'm not gonna lie, like that hit so deep. Like I actually sat there and I was like, shit. I was speechless because it threw me off from what I was expecting going into this final episode. And I was like, bro, that is. Hold on, guys, give me 1 second. Got a phone call coming. It will be real, real brief. Okay. And now I'm officially back. Didn't take too long. It was just super, super quick. But yeah, like their exchange, like their bromance. If there's one thing I'm going to say this right here, right now, Aaron and Armin is peak best friends for life, and I will die on that hill. I'm gonna say that right now. That's a hill I'm gonna die on. Due to this change, beautiful, and to me, it takes an ending that I thought was pretty much like shit, like dog shit, because that's what I gave the manga chapter. The manga chapter I gave was pretty much dog shit. And that was before we got the extra pages. And it does bump it up because now you've changed the structure of the conversation and you're ending it off with this. And it's so much more powerful. It's so much more powerful this way. In my opinion, it's a much more powerful conversation, if you will. But yeah, no. As far as like Aaron regarding himself as an idiot, I also kind of see that sort of like in a meta commentary sense from Isayama side of things, because if you've seen the latest interview that Isayama came out with the New York Times, he talked about him kind of feeling a little bit of relatability with Aaron, where when Aaron got the founder's power, like he was so consumed with power, and it like kind of kept him confined, if you will. And Isayama kind of had that same approach with the manga because he already had kind of an ending in mind, and because with that ending, he felt obligated to kind of like push through with it, with that ending, instead of like say, maybe I should change it, maybe I shouldn't. And it became one of those things of like, the manga got super big, the anime got super big, and it was so much for Yusayama. And I guess it's a more of a relatability aspect of like, yo, like I'm just a normal guy who just got so much power. Now, what I probably would have done, personally speaking, with that line of dialogue, maybe I would have retweaked it just a little bit. Instead of saying like I'm an idiot, maybe the best dialogue approach probably should have been like what's a good line I can think of? It's because, you know, I'm hot-headed. I don't know if that's any better, but like, like I'm hot-headed. Like I go in with a single approach, something like I think I definitely do feel like that. At least that line should have been a little bit more would have been tweaked a little bit. But that's just me. Who knows? I might do a discussion video just on that line by itself. But I do see, both the pros of that conversation and also like the negative side too. That's kind of why I put that in the negative, not negative, the neutral zone. But it's okay. The ending song, that was okay too. I wasn't super big on that one per se, but that's it. That those are just my thoughts on the neutral category. Now we get to probably what a lot of people were expecting, and that's the negatives. The negative aspects of the final episode. And there is some. There is definitely some negatives that I do want to tackle that this finale did have. Number one, the biggest negative were no casualties. Like, yeah, was it cool seeing everyone like in their Titan, not the Titan form, so like seeing everyone like have a hand in this final battle, like having a role, if you will? Yes, it was really cool seeing like everyone like take on like the ancient Titans, taking on the founding Titans, seeing Eren and Armin like have like their fight, Mikasa being a badass, Levi being a badass. Like it was really, really cool. But the one thing, in my opinion, that should have happened, one person needed to go out. I do think that should have been the case. You lose one person from the alliance, I think you would have, like, yeah, there was tension technically with the fight, but when you really look at it, it's one of those things of like no one really died. There was no like big sacrifices, if you will. And when you look at previous battles that we've had in Attack on Titan, there's always been, stakes. Some like huge, like heavy losses. You've at least had that with Attack on Titan up until this point. And the argument could be made of like, well, you did lose Hanji, you did lose, you know, Magath, but keep in mind all that stuff was pre-final battle, not during final battle. It was pre. That was all before they got to the founding Titan. And in my opinion, there's a few candidates that you could have probably said. Maybe Levi was an obvious one for sure, given the state that he was in. But then you also had Jean, Connie, Gabby. And that goes into my next point, which were the pure Titans reverting back into humans. Pretty much when the hallucinogenia, like, dispersed the gas and you had them becoming pure Titans, when when it ends, it's like, oh, look, the pure Titans are back to being humans. It's like, well, yeah, kind of just took away the tension. Like, bro, like we had a little bit of like sense of tragedy going on. Like, dude, this sucks. Like, I can't believe the fate that they're in. And honestly, that send off for Jean and Connie was good. It was a good send off. So to kind of take that away in the ending is kind of just like, okay, it's not what I would have done. Like, I remember mentioning this when I did the final chapter discussion, but when the Titan Curse ends, it should have been exclusive for the shifters. Like for Annie, for Peak, for Armin and Reiner, it makes perfect sense for them. The pure Titans is kind of where I draw the line of like, see, they probably should have been the ones that, you know, bit the bullet. And it still would have kind of kept that tension of like, bro, like, yeah, we won the battle. And, it came with consequences, you know? Like, to me, bringing the pure Titans in and reverting them back into human makes it too perfect. At least to me, it feels a little too perfect. I know some people want to say, well, Eren went out. Yeah, but you have to keep in mind that Eren was the objective for the Alliance to take out. So you can't really count Eren in that sense. which I got to talk about this. Historia. The fact that Historia throughout like this final season really didn't play that much of a huge role. And I remember this being a huge talking point on the manga too, because Historia became pregnant. And a huge talking point about Historia was the pregnancy. Like, why did she get pregnant? Was the child Aaron's? I remember because I was a part of that discussion, and I do think, in my opinion, Aaron being the father probably would have been a more logical approach. In my opinion, it would have made sense, but to drag out this pregnancy plot line and like have this mystery of like, oh, I wonder like who knocked up like was it really the farmer? Was it Aaron? Like it went on for too long, and then when you bring up this in the final chapter, um, not only in the final chapter but for this final episode, it's kind of like why was this necessary? You know, like why treat a character like Historia who had such an incredible story arc in the Uprising arc, and then however can it get this treatment? It's like, bro, like, what are we doing? So negative from me on that, for if you will. But I do like how she kind of, you know, took what Aaron told her, and Tatakai, Tatakai, Tatakai. Like, one side is gonna come out of this, and it wasn't just a choice made by Aaron. It was a choice made by the world. You know, it's because of like everything that went on in the world. That's what led us to this. Also, hey, General Grievous, how's it going? I know the stream's gonna be going on for a bit, but you know, final episode. Just gotta have fun. Um, there was that. Now, this point is me kind of nitpicking, but it's what Aaron was talking to Armin about, and that was him exploring other possible scenarios that he tested, which again, really cool. But you only really get that through dialogue. You're not shown any of that. And I think it would have been nice if, say Aaron's talking about that. And we see like little flashes of like what these other outcomes would have been. To me, that's kind of it's a cool case scenario that you get with the anime, especially like for additions being made for this last episode. But where it misses the mark is, just seeing it visually, like, okay, what these other scenarios have been, you know? And that's kind of where it leads there. Next one's kind of big because it's a complaint I had in the manga, and it's still a complaint that I have right now. The power of love ultimately is what ends the Titan curse. Mikasa's choice of killing Eren is what Ymir needed to see in order to end the curse. Because turns out this entire time, Ymir was in love with King Fritz. And I still think to this day, like, that's just weird. And it comes out of left field. Like, really? Like, being a slave is one thing, but to say that she was in love with King Fritz, it just feels so out there. Like, we're doing all this, and it's like, bro, like, you kind of wonder, like, okay, so why was she so content with serving King Fritz? And the only answer you get is that, well, she was in love with him, and she felt compelled to, keep going with it. And I mean, I guess in a sense, it's one of those things like, well, Mikasa did love Eren, and kind of get a little semi connection there. But I don't know. Like, that's still one to me where I'm just like, it still just comes out of left field, you know? So that's a negative point for me of like the Titan Curse ending because of like, okay, Mikasa's choice of killing Eren out of love, and that's kind of what ends it. What I would have done, I'm gonna say this right now, rather than it being something like that, the Titan Curse ending to me would have made much more sense if you kill the worm. Because the worm is kind of like the source of like the Titans, right? So to me, it would have made much more sense. You kill the worm, Titan Curse end. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple. It's like, okay. You're like, yeah, maybe, or it could have been like a collaborative effort. Maybe you have to kill the worm and Eren at the same time, and that's what ends it. I think that would have been a much better way to conclude the Titan Curse because then it's kind of like, well, okay, it is just based on, you know, love is kind of what ends it. But that's just me. Okay, I have to talk about this. Eren killing his mother. It's it was probably one of the most dumbest reveals I found in the manga, and it's still a huge issue with me, even now watching it in the anime, because you pretty much took a moment that set up Eren and his like drive and motivation to kill the Titans just by chance. And now you're kind of making it to where he's the one who's responsible for setting himself up for that goal. It's like, yeah, Bertolt's time, it was not his time yet to go. And so I sent Dina to where my mother was. And that retroactively kind of forced me to showcase my hatred towards the Titans. It's one of those things where, it's like a bootstrap paradox. I don't think this is one of those things that we really needed, per se. Now, well, in my opinion, what you probably could have done, maybe not have Eren be the one that kills Eren's mom to kill Carla, but imagine this. It wasn't Eren. You find out it was Ymir. You find out Ymir's the one that takes control of that situation, manipulates Dina, and she's the one that forces her to go down the direction of where Eren's mother's at. It would have been pretty twisted, but it still keeps Eren kind of like intact of like, okay, so he's not the one that's necessarily responsible for creating his own backstory. It would have been Ymir. I think that would have been a much better reveal. You know? At least that's what I think. I mean, like, yeah, I kind of get it. Like, yo, he did this to himself. I do understand that, but at the same time, it's kind of like, okay, so all this was like destined. It wasn't like planned or anything. Like, and I sort of understand it to a degree because, well, Aaron manipulated the whole incident with Grisha. And that was a pretty boss thing. I don't think anyone's gonna deny that. Was what happened with Grisha? Like it was pretty messed up, but at the same time, you can kind of get an idea of why Aaron did that because it was like, bro, like we're in this moment right now. Like, why are you in this scenario and not completing what needs to be done? That one I get, but the Carlo one to me is just one of those things that shouldn't be there. And like I said, how I would have probably done it, Ymir probably should have been the one that forces Gina to go into that direction. And that could have been a thing with Eren going like, "What?" Like, I think that to me would have probably been a lot more heartbreaking if it was Ymir that sent Dina to where Carla was. Because then, instead of it being Eren that retroactively creates his own, motivation and goals for the Titans, it's Ymir that does it. I think, again, like I said, more powerful, ultimately. And the last point I want to talk about, and this isn't really like a huge thing per se, but it's kind of more or less kind of like the lack of exploration on Aaron's view from season 4. Because now, yes, you do get a lot of Aaron throughout season 4. You do. It's not a matter of like you don't see Aaron, but it's more like you don't really get us an idea of like what's going on, like his mindset. And I will say, when you start off the time skip with that, it is one of those cases of like, whoa, holy shit! Like Aaron, as far as time skips go, in anime and manga, like if we're comparing him to say Naruto, we're comparing him to Ichigo. Aaron definitely from pre time skip to post time skip, one of the best like character evolutions because you see how Aaron is as not necessarily naive, but definitely you do see the shonen elements of his character during the pre time skip era. And to see him again in the post time skip, you see him kind of go through this reflection. Again, not through his mindset, but just seeing like with what decisions he's making. He's a lot more practical and he's not like rushing into things like as much. It's a lot more methodical and you see kind of how he grows up. It's kind of like going from an adolescent to a young adult. And I thought that was really great of seeing Aaron through that. But the thing I think that's a huge drawback to this is starting off the time skip like that. I thought was really cool because it was like, bro, okay, so you know what Aaron's doing. You're seeing him in the story, but you're not really getting an idea of like what's going on in his subconscious thought, kind of like with what you got throughout the pre time skip. And you really only get that in like little shades, like when he does the rumbling, when he's, approaching Marley. That's like kind of like the only little instance you get it. I think it would have been for sure, I will say, would have been so much better getting this during the rumbling. Like, let's say the rumbling starts, and as you're going through like the alliance and seeing what they're doing, and you get like little moments like here and there of Aaron just reflecting back on like what happened, like say after he left the speech that was going on in Marley, like how he got to the battlefield where he's going to like take the bullet and stab himself in the eye. Like little inklings like that would have been really really cool to see. Like okay, so what's his mindset? And the only real time you get that is during Final Chapters Part 1. That was the only occasion where you get that. You get it there, and you get it in like the second half of the final season Part 2. I want to say what was that? Episode 88? Yeah, so you only get it there during like those two instances. And I think as the rumbling was going on, it would have been better getting like little inklings of it throughout when you're seeing it. When you're seeing what the alliance is doing. And that's pretty much it. That's pretty much all I gotta say when it comes to like the negatives of the final chapters part 2, which I know a lot of you are probably thinking, what's the rating? Like, what am I going to give this final episode of Attack on Titan? And again, like, I'm at a loss for words because this is going to be the final time. Like, the very last time I talk about Attack on Titan. And again, I've been following this series, this anime, since it came out. When I was still young, 4 episodes in, 2013. I was there when it ended, the first season. Immediately jumped on board the manga because I couldn't wait to see what was going on. We waited 4 years before season 2 came out. And then after that, got season 3, right? Which I kind of had a similar situation with the final season somewhat because you had season 3 part 1. And then I think you waited a whole year, right? Before you got final season part, not season, season 3 part 2. Let me actually look that up real quick. Because I remember the gap between season 1 and season 2 very vividly. And I'm not gonna lie, like that wait was, it was brutal. That if we're talking about brutal waits, the gap between seasons 1 and seasons 2 was something else. But okay, let's see here. So season 3 part 1 ended October 2018. And then season 3 part 2 didn't start until 2019 of April. So what is that? Let me think here. Okay, so about a 6 month gap. I wasn't too bad. So you had like a 6 month gap between uh season 3 part 1 and season 3 part 2, and then a whole year ultimately before you got final season part 1, and then relatively again like almost 8 months. No, 9 months. You have almost had like a 9 month gap from final season part 1 to final season part 2, and then again the situation we're in right now, almost relatively 11 months for final chapters part 1, and then a 6 month gap for, no, not even 6 months. Um, okay, 8 months. An 8 month gap between final chapters part 1 and final chapters part 2. Like again, it's the journey has been so incredible. And again, I've been here since then. Jumped on board the manga in 2013. I was there when the manga ended. And I mean, again, lost for words, but what more do you want me to say? The one thing I didn't really get a chance to talk about, I do want to say, huge highlight point. Parody being blown up. Okay? Now you're probably thinking like Lucky. That's a little messed up. Like parody being blown up is a highlight point for you? And I'm only saying it's a highlight point because I remember reading the manga and a lot of like people who were like pro alliance were telling me, yo, if they beat Eren, if they can just talk it out, like peace talks, everything will be resolved. And what I love about the idea of parody being blown up is that not only were the alliance kind of proven wrong in that sense, but it kind of showcases that, like, look, yes, you may have stopped the rumbling. Yes, you may have stopped like a real catastrophic event from taking place and wiping out the entire world. But you get a sense of like just because you stop one thing, that doesn't prevent other events from taking place, like other conflicts, other wars. And there's a lot of interpretation, obviously, when it comes to this scene. But the way I look at this is because of what happened during the Rumble with the outside world, and because everyone who lived through the rumbling already knows that Parody had these titans. They came after us. They leveled the world. And that when the time finally came, we counterattack to Parody. And that's how I kind of approached it. I've always kind of approached it as this is going to be the comeback. Similar to how Parody struck back against Marley, this is now the world striking back against Parody. It's, again, it's a very symbolic note to end off with, you know, stopping one conflict doesn't prevent other conflicts from taking place. It's, and again, just seeing that, I think it's a fitting end for a series like Attack on Titan because when the chapter came out of 139, you didn't have the extra 8 pages. You pretty much ended off Attack on Titan with the bird wrapping the scarf around Mikasa, and like that was the last scene. And it was kind of just like, this is too happy. Like for Attack on Titan, this was the definition of like, okay, it was a little too happy of an ending, you know? So getting those 8 pages really helped out a lot with that. You do kind of get to see with what happens with Mikasa a little bit, like in those little panel shots, if you will. Like she eventually does find someone. She has a child with them. The guy, I'm pretty sure it's obviously Jean. I'm like 100% sure that's Jean that she ends up with. Um, Mikasa eventually passes on. Um, and I think Armin's there, right? Like Armin's like one of like the last ones that's still there because you have Eren's tomb, his gravestone. You have Mikasa's gravestone, and Armin's the last one. So I don't know where his graves. I'm pretty sure he would probably be buried right there too, like probably like right next to Mikasa, because you have Eren, Mikasa, Armin, and that's it. So, given all that, oh yeah, I also didn't forget to talk about. I also forgot to talk about Reiner sniffing Historia's letter. Like, I don't know. That was weird. Still pretty weird. Like, it was one of those things of like, bro, what are you doing? Like, for real? Like, you're sniffing like handwriting? Okay, it's a little weird, a little uncomfortable, but it is what it is, you know? But ultimately, when it comes to this final episode, and I've thought long and hard about this, okay? It's good. It's a good final episode of Attack on Titan. Does it still have like problems? Yes, I've addressed those problems for sure. 100%. It still has problems. Like narratively speaking, it does have problems. If and what carries the episode, I'm gonna address why I'm giving it the good rating. The OST, the animation, that carries this final episode. And definitely, I will say the biggest change is the dialogue exchange between Armin and Eren. And that those 3 points for me is kind of what elevated what would have been a very meh final episode to a relatively like okay plus to good final episode. And again, it's not perfect. I've obviously listened that there's a huge host of complaints, but that's kind of where I stand. Like, it's a good final episode, but make no mistake in me saying that it was a perfect ending because it wasn't. There were still problems that this final episode has, and that's pretty much it. Like, that is pretty much my thoughts on this final episode of Attack on Titan. You know, season 4, final chapters, part 2. I'm not gonna lie. I actually feel like I'm gonna get really emotional right now because like this is it. This is the last time I'm gonna be talking about this. It really is. Shit. Because again, I've been here since 2013, and I don't know how many times I've said that, but it's true. It's true. But let's see here. Oh yeah, and also let's see what General Grievous is saying. I'm still kind of in denial that Attack on Titan actually ended. I know, like, and again, for me, this is coming from someone I genuinely despise the manga ending. The manga ending was not good. And for me to say that this final episode was good, it really speaks a lot. And like I said, it all comes down to that one simple change of Aaron and Armin, that little dialogue exchange. That really set it off for me. Of making this good. Again, not great, not amazing, it's not pure perfection. This ain't a 10 out of 10 final episode. Good for me, personally, is like a 7. It's like a 7 out of 10. And that's it. And yeah, see you later here. But I do want to address one thing before I finally go. And that is going to be what comes next for me. Like, what comes next for me after this? Well, keep in mind, the dub hasn't come out yet. The dub for Attack on Titan Final Chapters Part 2, it has yet to even be announced yet. So, whenever the dub does come out for Final Chapters Part 2, I will definitely tackle another stream for the Final Chapters Part 2 because, like, the dub for Attack on Titan to me, it's very much as important as the sub was. Because I think they were both, like, really, really great final, not final, but they were really, really great. Obviously, they both have, like, their pros and cons, if you will. I know people have their preferences, like, are you dub or you sub? For me, I love both of them. Attack on Titan is like one of those series where I can watch it in dub and I can watch it on sub. And that's kind of my general thoughts on that. But definitely I will say I will be back again for Final Chapters Part 2 when the dub comes out, and I will definitely be making more videos just on the finale, if you will. But again, like now manga readers and anime only is like now like we're no longer like in like these individual bubbles of like you can't spoil anything, you can't really say much. Now everyone's like all kind of like grouped together. And I do want to address one final thing here. And I've been saying that for a while now, but simply for people who are in total shock that anime onlys are genuinely enjoying this. And I say this to someone who is a who is an ending hater. As a ending hater, I just want to say Like, it's okay if they like the ending. It really is okay if they think this was a if they like this ending, but I don't want this to be a case of like everyone like jumping the gun of like, yo, like what the hell, like why don't you understand of why this ending was so shit? Because like in the world we live in, like people are allowed to have different opinions. And I will say this too for ending defenders. If ending haters don't like the ending, then don't force them. Like again, I feel like this is gonna be a debate that's gonna be never ending in the community. You're gonna have the ending defenders, you're gonna have the ending haters, just like just duking it out. And it's a real shame. Like it honestly is just a real shame that this is where we're all at. But ultimately, that is all I have to say for Attack on Titan Season 4, Final Chapters Part 2. Overall rating, like I said, it's good. And let me know what you guys' thoughts were on this final episode. Huge shout out to Mappa for, going through the ringer, putting all their time and effort, their soul and energy into this final episode because I can tell it wasn't an easy task. It definitely wasn't an easy task. And just seeing the journey that they've been on from the final season, just coming out from the shoes of Wit Studios and seeing with where they have come, like Mappa needs to praise. They definitely need the praise of like what they were able to deliver. And I do think they delivered. And that's it. That's what all I gotta say. So let me know how you guys felt about the final episode. Did you like it? Did you not like it? What was your favorite parts about it? Do you have any gripes about the final episode? And I kind of wonder with what's next. I really do kind of wonder with what's to come. But aside from the guys, that's pretty much it. I'm Lucky7. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more Attack on Titan content because there is going to be more stuff I'm going to be covering for Attack on Titan, like individual like video discussions and whatnot. But until then, this is Lucky G7 signing off for definitely, for the time being, the final time on Attack on Titan, the final season, final chapters, part 2. And I'll catch you guys again later on another live stream whenever I do the dub. So, see you later, everyone.